Welcome to Life
on
Life's
terms
with your host Justin
and Chelsey.
Today we are going to talk about the last bits and pieces that Liam and I had talked about in yesterday's episode about the Portugal model, curative discharge, and the commitment process. Mm-hmm. And then Chelsey and I are going to talk about climate change, severe weather, and the current forest fires in our home province of Alberta, Canada.
Yeah.
So, how is it? If anybody's been following the Facebook page, you and I have not been in the studio for a while. Except, I guess last week we were. We started last week.
Yeah, we did one episode. But I mean, we had a huge stretch there where we were recording lots and then a huge break. And then we've done one episode.
Since you've been able to culminate or think about the format change, how are you liking it? Like I've put on Facebook, this month is really starting to shape up.
Yeah.
So how's your research going when it comes to people coming in, so on, like all that stuff?
Well, I'm excited about the month. I love that the way that we're doing it, the two different topics.
Yeah.
I love that it's putting out lots of information, right? And we're reaching so many different more people in one sitting type thing. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm doing so much research. I have notes everywhere. I've been reaching out to lots of people, which is nice.
Yeah.
I got my first couple of no's from guests coming on the show.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, wah, wah, wah.
What was the reasoning?
Totally discouraged. As entertaining as our show is, due to some political stuff that we have mentioned, they did not think they would be a good fit.
As?
They weren't specific.
Are they avid
They were
listeners?
talking about the partisan. No, not avid. I asked them. They went and listened to 3 or 4 episodes before they gave me an answer. And then I was kind of chuckling. I was like, who knows what episode they listened to? It could have been the one where I was talking about running around naked and getting arrested.
Yeah.
Right? Like, who knows? All our episodes are not like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very strange, right?
We offer a lot of value to people. And we are also open about some embarrassing shit that we've done. That's just what it is. It's life, right?
You know what, though? I think also, regardless of, and I see this happening quite often, where political views are political views for the time and the moment, and they change quite often.
Often, yeah.
And I think the thing is if somebody's not willing to sit down and engage those political views, then and have a real conversation. How does one ever change those political views? And I think in social media, what we see now is you become fixed into these so-called labels, and you can never say sorry. There's no recourse. There's no road to redemption, so to say. And because of that particular view, who's really not being forgiving or understanding or trying to stand in somebody's shoes to understand why their thought process is that way? Mm-hmm. You know, who's really being jaded?
Yeah.
Right? Who's really being the person that is just unwilling to see the other side of things?
Yeah. Well, the person I spoke with is in the line, well, he's a meteorologist. And he said that in his opinion, he didn't believe any meteorologist would say yes for the same reasoning as him, because in their line of work, they are not allowed to support people who have specific political views. And he said, I don't mean any offense. You guys are really entertaining. I was like, oh, no offense taken. Thanks for your feedback. That's fine. If you're not a fit, you're not a fit. Like, I don't care. There's other people.
And you know what? I think also with the show, we have quite a bit of integrity in the fact that, I mean, we obviously haven't said who this person is.
No, I never would.
And nor would we.
No.
You know, so it's not like we're not going to weaponize our microphones. We're not going to demonize.
No, of course not.
Anybody of that. Anybody. I just don't think that that's valid. It takes away from the integrity of the show and who we are as people. The no's are pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
and,
I had a yes, and then that turned into just ghosting my future emails.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I would prefer no, to be honest.
Yeah.
Just tell me no.
Yeah, it's nice to have balls, right? Like when
Yeah.
you're dealing with somebody with balls and they're just like, no, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Like, I totally respected this no that I got from the meteorologist. He's like, yeah, I checked out your show. I liked it. And he was very nice. It was fine. Like, I respected the no instead of like checking my email every day and wondering like, am I going to get an answer? Are we going to pick that date, lock down that date? But that's fine. Again, maybe the same thing happened, or maybe they just got scared of the mic. That happens to people too.
Oh yeah, that happens
right?
too.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when they see when they see it all. It's one thing to say yes and then they come in the room. I was saying this to Liam yesterday, and then you can hear on the mic the like their dried mouth. and their face just goes white.
Yeah.
You know, as you're doing the intro, they're like, shit, this is real.
Yeah.
Right? Well, Jeff.
It's happening.
When we had Jeff, the photographer, on, he was like, I was nervous about coming in. Why, Jeff? He's like, 'cause you fucking guys are like real shit. You don't, you fucking put people to task.
Yeah.
Right? It's not, I don't think it's, I don't know. I think that's just who we are. Mm-hmm. We're not, I think that's the other thing is we're not classical journalists, right? I never went to school for journalism.
Nope.
I mean, I write the way that I write. We do the podcast the way that we do the podcast. And I think that there's some sort of comfort with people from like certain cable televisions,
yes.
cable television networks, so on and so forth, that they know that the person who's conducting the interview isn't going to go to these certain places. I mean, I'll put it to you this way. When Liam was sitting in yesterday being an academic, talking about teaching law, I can tell you this, it's been difficult to find somebody practicing law to talk about restorative justice and how it's practiced.
I believe that.
So yesterday's show, when Liam and I were sitting down, it became this thing of he would say, this is the theory, and I would say, this is the way it's practiced in the courtroom. And that's how it was going back and forth in the banter, because that was the only way that you could see the practicality and the theory that restorative justice is being taught in school. And this is the way now how Crown attorneys and defense attorneys can practice this within the court and within the courtroom here in Canada, right? So it was very, very... even Liam was saying after the show, you know, he's lucky that he is in academia because it allows his mind to expand in a place where, I think that's what he was trying to articulate in yesterday's show when he was saying he can see it at a 40 or 50 foot sight as opposed to being so narrow.
Yeah, see, that's actually what one person I asked him on the show told me to look for. Somebody who was in academia.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah. Because...
Or had their own, just more personal business, right? And I was like, yeah, okay, fair enough. Thanks for your feedback. Awesome.
Well, and the other thing that I've recognized too is people who are public, like you and I are.
Yep.
I think podcasters are more willing to go on other podcaster shows, but there's a huge gap between us and like cable shows.
Yeah. Yeah.
They won't, like cable networks won't even engage us because we're killing them. That's the truth. Like once we go live on YouTube, guess what we are? We're a live podcast.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's where eventually Life on Life's Terms will get to. And it won't be a pre-recorded show. It'll be a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday show, you know?
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that's why there's such a gap between us and there's not so much engagement. Also, like I was saying with Liam, because he's in academia and he practices law, he's willing to go into a courtroom, stand on his hat, and create and produce an argument that no judge has ever heard before. Because really, when you go into a courtroom, as much as these lawyers posture and, you know, if you've ever been in a really good trial, it's like watching Law and Order. The difference is, and lawyers are very dramatic. And lawyers are also very, very passionate about the Constitution and the rights and all these things that their clients have. However, the process and and prudence of that process is what dictates anything in the courtroom.
Yeah.
So as much as you want to believe that your client is what your client is, the judge, who is the person who basically procures these policies within the courtroom as these arguments are being established, he's the one who adjudicates what the line is throughout these arguments, really turns it into, this is what the process dictates. However, you cannot breach this line.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you look at the Criminal Code of Canada, they tell you what the defense is to be used for that actual charge. Right? So like for instance, if you were charged with illegal guns or something,
yeah,
it would tell you what's a viable defense is, let's say you're a drug dealer with a gun. Well, you cannot depend on the police to protect you. So therefore, you're allowed to protect yourself. That's a viable defense.
Really?
To have an illegal gun in Canada.
Really?
Right, for sure.
I did not know that.
100%. So like it will tell you the defense that a defense lawyer is allowed to use. Well, try to set that with Liam. He's not using that argument. Like, he's going to say, the guy was suicidal. That's why he had the gun.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Like, you're crazy. He wasn't trying to protect himself. He wasn't going to hurt anybody but himself, literally.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this is what you have with a guy who's an academic practicing law.
Yeah.
Right. He's willing to test it to its boundaries, and to go into a place where we try to produce the Portugal model into Canada, and a viable way of using the commitment court in order to do so.
Okay, so this episode is out the day after Liam's episode, but I haven't yet listened to Liam's episode.
Yeah.
So yes, please tell me about this Portugal model.
So the Portugal model is basically, so those who listened to the show yesterday would know that drugs are decriminalized in Portugal across the board. Okay, so we have legalized marijuana in Canada, but we have not. And at one time, marijuana was decriminalized. Okay, which means you couldn't go to jail for a personal amount.
Right. Okay.
Okay, you get a fine.
So in Portugal, all drugs are that way.
All drugs are that way.
All right.
But it's like heroin is like 5 grams or less.
Okay.
It's a weekly dispensation that you're allowed, basically, right? But what they beefed up was like treatment and all that stuff, like treatment, outpatient counseling, and detox time.
Yeah.
And they made it readily accessible to people. So remember how in our personal stories, we waited to go to treatment?
Yeah, and the wait was terrible.
There's no wait time there.
So was the fight to even get in detox?
So detox... Detox is open, and you typically wait from estimated, and I mean, I'm not in Portugal, so I don't know if this is right or not, but estimated wait times are like 24 hours. So they have an actual door-to-door service from detox to treatment. Mm-hmm. And their treatment is 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Wow.
So that's far more superior to ours.
Absolutely.
Right? In the length of time, right? And they had at one time a 43% IV use in their population. They're now down to 9%. 43% of heroin use.
Yeah.
Which is huge. Portugal's a very small country, though. Now they have an 8% addiction rate. And they started this process in 93.
What a turnaround.
So
hey?
even they had an economic crisis, and I said this yesterday in the show in 2011, and they had to borrow $115 billion from the World Monetary Fund, which America gave them. They slashed every budget 40% except the mental health budget.
Huh.
That was the one budget they did not touch because of the yield. So Portugal actually looked at the taxpayer base as a yield. So they were investing X amount of dollars into these people who needed to be rehabilitated so that they could be a part of a community in order to start paying taxes. Therefore, it became a recycled tax base, which means we pay up front and you pay us back. And then we can continuously give people this help. And eventually it whittled everything down. Whereas right now, I think here in Edmonton alone, for a treatment center like Henwood, which is AHS ran, It's a 18-day program. So it's a state instituted treatment center. It used to be a 3-week wait. It's now 12 weeks.
12 weeks. Wow.
To get medical care that your taxpayers, like tax-paying dollars, pay for. It's a 12-week wait. There's no way you're going to detox for 12 weeks. Get to, and I also in yesterday's episode told you what the wait times were in Alberta. And we have a socialistic system for healthcare in Canada. Yet when I sat back and I thought about everything that Liam and I had talked about, one could almost say that the elites who are the bureaucrats within the AHS or Health Society of Canada or the Health Ministry of Canada are complacent to a genocide. Like they don't give a shit. Because if they actually gave a shit, they would see, this is the problem that I foresee. I had a conversation with somebody who's in this world as a bureaucrat worker. And you and I could sit here and say, well, we have a housing issue, we have a drug issue, we have a judicial issue. And you and I, in simplistic terms, will look at it and say, well, this is what we need to do in order to correct this system. They, as in air quotes, they as in the ministries and bureaucrats, have to run case studies before they're willing to spend the money in it. Well, the problem is we don't have time for case studies anymore. We don't have time to what if things. We're in a place right now where it's a crisis, it's a do or die situation for the opioid crisis, especially in Alberta, which ties into restorative justice because we're just muling people out into the same recidivist cycle.
Same life.
Right? We're not really segueing them. And even though they may find like I'm 1 in a million, I got a shot, I got sober, haven't relapsed, all that stuff. However, I carry a label with me for the rest of my life now. If I had the commitment piece, I do not have to tell anybody about a commitment to a hospital. I'm not compelled to do so. Am I compelled to do so with my criminal charges? 100%. And we have no pardon services in Canada.
Wait, if a person's been committed to a hospital, they don't have to share that?
No. They can't ask you in a job interview. Have you ever been committed to a mental health institution? They can't ask you that. But they can ask you if you've been charged.
Right.
Right? Do you have criminal convictions? Well, yeah. But they can't ask you, have you ever been committed to a hospital? Nope. They cannot ask you that.
Interesting.
Because it's your health file.
Yeah, exactly.
Is more confidential than your judicial file. Right? So they create almost a class of people that's stuck. I mean, we talked about stats of and these are conservative numbers, man, of almost 10,000 people or almost 9,000 people in 2017 charged with methamphetamine possession.
Yeah.
That's 10,000 people in Canada.
That's just crazy.
Who are going to have that label. And we do not have a pardons process any longer in Canada. We have a temporary forgiveness process.
And how do you feel about that?
Temporary forgiveness is not pardon.
Yeah, do you think there should be pardons?
Well, we had them at one time.
Yeah, we did.
And they no longer exist. They only exist for those people who have such minimal charges that it doesn't matter anyways. It would be stricken from their record regardless.
Regardless, yeah.
Instead, what we've now done is we've now classified people who have a possession for the purpose charge, which is, I laid out what that charge is in yesterday's episode.
Yep.
And typically, those people who are charged with possession for the purpose are addicts, just as the people who were holding drugs using them. Yeah. Right? In my opinion, I'd rather sell drugs to produce my habit than go and rob people to produce my habit.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Breaking and entering instead.
Like all those property charges, right? That's all conducive towards addictive behavior, which should also be lumped in to restorative justice. See, the biggest thing, one of my biggest takeaways from Liam was the state. So the government of Canada or the government of Alberta is claiming as a victim and adjudicator. That's what they're doing. They're victim, judge, and jury
Yeah.
all in one.
Yeah.
How does that make any, and how do you tell an addict who can't even see the repercussions of their actions? Fine, throw them in jail all day long, but you haven't learned shit if you don't know who you've hurt.
Exactly.
Like how often in your active addiction was your delusion that you're only hurting yourself?
Yeah, pretty often.
All the time.
Yeah.
You can't see how you're hurting your parents.
Oh God.
You can't
no.
see how you've embarrassed your family showing
No.
up loaded. You can't
No.
see those things. You see them when you're sober after a year or two.
I was going to say, even after a length of time, like I didn't see immediately. I still thought I was the only one that had been hurt.
Yeah. And even like driving DUI. You can't, yeah, it's illegal, but fuck, I need booze. Mm-hmm. It's an issue of selfishness. And in the addict mind, I think the addict thinking or mentality or anybody in that place that is suggestive to use restorative justice means is sitting in a place mentally where they're like, well, I'm not as drunk as I could be.
Yeah.
I'm not I'll use cocaine to straighten myself out so I can, you know what I mean? Like,
as irrational as that may sound to people who have not lived that life or experienced that is exactly how our sick brains seem to function.
Well, and I said it in that blog, we have to accept that the addict is not what we have what parents have created. So if parents have to accept that, society needs to really look at the dictation of this person is not a sane person.
Yep.
So like that, and I'm going to say that quote again from the Prime Minister of Portugal when he said, I'm just looking for it right now, where he said our first goal is to help people to resume their dignity. An addict has to do whatever to get his fix each day. We cannot ask him or her to behave as a free citizen because they're not free.
No.
You know, and I think this is where society and community really needs to look at the large portion of people who are in corrections are there because of addictive behaviors. They're not there because they are antisocial, nor is it because they have departed from normative behaviors of society. That's not the reality. The reality is they're suffering from a serious mental illness called addiction. And they are not responsible for a lack of cognitive discernment. The decisions that are made by an addict are not anything that they would make if they were sane.
No.
I mean,
oh my goodness.
How many times when you look at what you've done, you look at it as almost like a movie?
It absolutely is. Like 2 years now, right? We kind of talked about that last week for me. And I look back at crap that I have done, and not a chance in hell would I do 90% of it today.
Yeah.
Not a chance in hell.
Wait till you get 5 years.
Ugh.
When you have 5 years and you look back, you can't even recognize.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to say as an outsider, well, why couldn't you just see it then? Well, because there's an actual mental health. I mean, it's in the DSM-5, right? However, the court system dictates that that's not a viable defense to say that they're mentally incapable of the decisions that they've made because addiction does not affect the center cerebral cortex of the brain. Because that is not affected, therefore the capacity to understand your decisions is still there, which is true. The capacity is there to understand. However, the reality of the depth of what you've done is not there.
It's 100% not there.
And it only happens after you've been sober. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen in the moment. And it still doesn't happen when you're incarcerated even. As a matter of fact, when you recognize what you've done and if you have a glimmer of the capacity of what you've done in prison, you look for drugs and get high again. I mean, we are ignorant and naive to say that drugs don't exist in jail. We have people dying in jail from using drugs. So what do you think happens when all of a sudden there's a glimmer of like, oh shit, you go and get high because you run away from that again?
Oh yeah, for sure. You don't want to face it. The easiest way to not face it or to not feel ridiculous or shame is to just...
And we put people in a prison where they do not have access to people who can talk them through that shame and guilt of using when the reality or recognition happens of what they've done. Mm-hmm. So you put people in a eco or an echo or an environment where guys sitting in prison going, shit, I stole a car and, went on a tear and it was a high speed chase and oh my God, where's the drugs?
Yeah.
Whereas if they had a commitment in a hospital, they've gained a rapport with a counselor who's there 24 hours a day. And they're able to go and talk through these things with the counselor because there's confidentiality around it.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden they can recognize, yeah, shit, I really need help. As opposed to running for the drug dealer that's in your unit.
Yeah.
Right? And that, I think, is the contrast. This is why the restorative justice models really have to be looked at. We've lost curative discharge. We used to use curative discharge for people who had DUIs. And
can you explain curative discharge?
So curative discharge is like, people with the blow box in their cars?
Yep.
That's curative discharge. So they have to go to a program about alcohol use and addiction.
Yeah.
And they get a curative discharge. Counselor goes there, puts a hand on a Bible, swears that the person has done their duty in counseling, so on and so forth, and they really understand what they're doing. They really understand what they've done, so to say. And then that person then goes to like AA meetings, CA meetings, so on and so forth. The recidivist rate in curative discharge is not as high as somebody coming out of jail. So there is promise in within that.
Yeah.
But now that we've changed the laws in regards to DUI because of the legalization of marijuana, curative discharge is no longer a viable defense.
Okay.
So we've lost it. It's not to be used anymore. Chris Suchit, if you look back in previous...
Last season, I think, right?
Yeah, last season. Yeah. If you look up... I think, I just look for the name Chris Suchit. I think you can actually search it on our website, like on the podcasting site, and it'll come up with those episodes.
Right.
That's Chris's bread and butter, was curative discharge. So he talked about how that process actually looked, and a lot of lawyers didn't even know that they could use that to help people out. And Chris was a strong advocate of saying we need to use curative discharge even for people who have possession for the purpose charges, because curative discharge allows us to use the argument in court saying there is no cognitive discernment. The discernment and the decisions that they're making in the moment, there's no sanity behind it.
No, there's not.
So that's what we've lost by losing curative discharge.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. And so this is what shaped, right? I
feel like that discharge should have been expanded on, not lost.
Well, and I think for our American listeners, they're going to be blown away that drug court here in Canada, you have to plead guilty to get into it. In America, you do not plead guilty. It's wiped.
Oh, okay.
We don't have that here.
No.
In drug court in Canada, in order to get into drug court, you have to plead guilty. And you're going to serve a day in jail is what it looks like. You will have that yoke, that charge, that offense yoke around your neck for the rest of your life.
Yes, I met women in treatment who had come from jail, and it was part of the drug court, and they had spent months in jail before coming to treatment. Yeah. Their sentence actually wasn't reduced by that much even.
It's 2 years. They still have 2 years in drug court, in the drug court process.
Yep.
However, and at the end of all of it, it says that they only spent a day in jail. But that doesn't matter when you still have an indictable offense that you have to tell somebody that you committed.
Yep.
I mean, the question is always there. Do you have any criminal convictions? Yeah, I do. It's not, if it's a commitment, the court commits you to a mental health facility.
Mm-hmm.
That is way different than saying, yeah, we're charging you. It's a completely different process. You do not have to, you do not have to tell anybody that you've been committed into a hospital. But you do have to you can be compelled to tell people that you have a criminal conviction.
Right.
And this is where...
Can people ask you specifics?
100%.
What were you charged for?
Well, they actually don't. What they instead do is they ask you to subject yourself to a criminal record check.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you don't even get to defend yourself. They just see your criminal record. And they'll ask you, do you have convictions? Yes, I do. Sometimes they'll say, what is it? And then you tell them. But if you expand upon it, think about being a convict in that moment or an ex-convict in that moment. You start talking about why you were charged. And it's just like, yeah, you're a convict giving me another fucking story.
Right, trying to defend yourself.
That's right.
Justify, defend.
That's right. And then you're subject to people making up their own ideas, which again is how we started off this podcast, saying there's no road to redemption. Mm-hmm. Right? The judgment upon people is the judgment. And in all honesty, I'm a strong advocate in saying that we are people who should not be producing stereotypes. It's up to me to prove to you that I'm not an addict, or like I'm a recovered addict. Okay, it's up to me to do that. That's my responsibility. That's why I go to meetings. That's why I do what I do. However, I should be afforded the opportunity to prove it to you.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. My credibility is not for shit. It's taken me almost 6 years to get to this place. Mm-hmm. Yet you disregard it, or people can disregard it in one fell swoop of saying, yeah, well.
Yeah. It's easy for people to do.
And I think that's the issue with the criminal convictions, because now we have a large portion of society who is yoked with this classification of being a convict, right? And restorative justice is not about that. Restorative justice is about restoring your crimes to the community so that there, in my opinion, so that there's credibility for that person, regardless of what your charges are. Your charges aren't even looked at anymore. What's really looked at is what have you done towards your community, and not by recognition. It's like a resume.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't go on Facebook and put on blast, I went out and I did this. Who gives a shit? You should do it because doing good things is what you're supposed to do. Right? Yeah. With a convict, when you're given a prescription of what your restorative justice means is supposed to look like, well, yeah, that's how you did your time. And when you did your time and your time is all done, now it's time to not have that yoke of your charges laid over your head to be against you for the rest of your life. You served your time, right? It's done. It's done. And as it's done, your charges should be gone.
I agree.
So.
I do agree. Yeah, I know a female who's really struggling with that, who is in drug court, and job searching is an extremely scary thing for her.
Sure is.
It is. It just brings out so much shame just because of that one question. She's so scared to be asked, right? Or she's so scared to have to tell people. And
it's almost, and I know we're going to get in a lot of trouble me saying this, but it might as well just be a Star of David on your chest that you don't have to wear, but it becomes a verbal Star of David that you always have to tell people.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's totally unfortunate. It's a stain. It's a mark.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, yeah.
I mean, luckily there are employers out there who are very forgiving, and they have the same sort of mindset of, well, prove me that you are different.
Yeah. Like
second chances, so to speak, I guess is a way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, Alberta, imagine this. In Alberta, so the only province in Canada where you can have a criminal record and become a drug and alcohol counselor is Ontario. You cannot have a criminal record and be an addictions counselor for the Alberta government. That's not going to happen. Not going to happen. They will not accept it. You could be an addictions counselor for a not-for-profit,
Yeah.
but there's a difference in a pay scale from $60 an hour working for the government and $25 an hour working for a not-for-profit.
Right.
So we've classified these people as saying, well, because your criminal convictions, you're only as good as $25 an hour
See,
at the
that
top.
too, I believe, is unfortunate because don't you think people would rather hear, I know I would, in my opinion, would rather hear from somebody who has lived a similar lifestyle, who can actually relate to me, or I can relate to them. I feel more comfortable relating to them.
Why do you think this podcast is so popular with people who are in active recovery and active addiction?
Because we fucking get it.
We've been there, right? And we're
Yeah.
talking about it as a process. I mean, I said this in yesterday's episode that I think really needs to be brought to attention is those people who are dictating to us the process is of treatment zone and the process of treatment, okay, are people who've never been there and disregard the lived experience. Mm-hmm. And they say, this is what has to work. Like, fuck, it has to work. Yeah. That, like I said earlier in this podcast, they're looking at it as what is the test plot? What's the test pilot? What's the case study?
Yeah.
That doesn't work here. That does not work here. Right? And those are those elites, the executive directors for zones for Alberta Health Services. They don't know what the fuck's going on. They don't have a clue. And do you think that they're going to listen to people on the front line? Nope. Why would they? They don't have the education I have. It becomes a pissing contest as opposed to get past yourself. It's so petty. And people think that I'm just talking bullshit. I'm telling you, I've gone through this process. Mm-hmm. I've brought a viable program to the Alberta government, and because there was certain letters that weren't behind my name, it was disregarded.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because it works. The proof of concept was there and worked. Like 10 out of 10 people made it to fucking treatment. Mm-hmm. 10 out of 10. You know what the Alberta government bats? 1 out of 30. 1 out of 30 right now makes it to treatment. That is
I'm surprised it's even that high.
That's
to be honest.
Un-fucking real, man. You need 30 people to get 1.
Yeah. Just to get to treatment. And then is that one going to be part of the statistic that actually stays sober?
That's right.
Because that is not a very high statistic.
It's not working.
No.
I mean, the system that we have is not working. And so
That's terrible.
when you have these executive directors who are making these procedural ways for people to utilize these services, it's disregarded about how to do this in a mass. And then when you look at the Portugal model, like I said, even in the face of financial issues, they would not cut the budget of mental health. What do you think is the first thing that gets cut? Mental health doesn't get cut. Addictions. Mm-hmm. Addictions, justice, all of that potential tax base gets cut. I mean, you're better off to spend your money. You're better off to spend your tax-paying dollars on people who are ex-convicts and addicts than people on welfare. Mm-hmm. The reason for it is because at least you know they did something to get to fucking jail.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like they did something. It wasn't like and I'm not trying to beat up people on the social system. I'm just saying a lot of the people who were on Alberta Works or on the Works program or the welfare program in Canada, they're waiting for the next piece of funding to come through for them, which could be a disability claim, it could be a schooling claim, it could be so many different things, right? Yeah. So I'm not saying that they're lazy, but what I'm saying is the people who are in jail are people who have done something to get there, which means they're active.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Like they've done something, mm-hmm. right? I said the best entrepreneurs are the guys that you'll get out of jail. Flat out. They're most of them are gun ho. You know, they want to be self-made people.
Yeah.
Self-starters.
They have that let's do this mentality.
That's right. Right or wrong. That's what they have. Right? And I think We've really missed that. Climate change.
Oh, right. Wow. We are doing a drastic change in topic here.
Yeah.
So no segue or anything.
Well, I mean, out of the things that I've said, what would you advocate for? Like what would be the push? Because I think there's so many pieces. Would you go after the executive directors of who's running these portfolios? Or would you be an advocate against those people and put them... Because see, this is the other thing that I've recognized. Those people are not even known to the public. The public knows who the minister is.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't even know who you're talking about.
But nobody knows who the actual person is that's utilizing that budget for certain things. We don't even know who that is.
No.
And they have a job for like 25 years.
Yeah.
Right? Should we be, as a society, pushing into that? Or should we be pushing in as a public forum saying, we want this change? Or do we approach it as just going to court and seeing if we could throw our client against the wall, trying to get them a commitment into mental health court?
No, I don't like that idea.
I mean, there's three options.
I mean, it might work, but that's...
And I think the other thing is that the bureaucrats that work within those ministries, whether it be justice, health, or the welfare system, are so afraid of losing their $80,000 job a year, none of them are willing to talk. And it creates a culture of, we got to keep that class there. That's what it creates. You fucked up, so this is what you deserve.
Yeah.
Right?
There are definitely people with that mentality.
And so because that mentality is there, my question, if that's the question, if that's where your mind goes, my question is this: when did you break the law last?
Right? When did you not fuck up?
Because breaking the law means speeding. Mm-hmm. And we're not talking about a contrast of what's the difference between drug dealing and speeding.
Texting and driving.
It doesn't matter. It's all illegal. So my point is, you can still get thrown into fucking jail for texting and driving if you decide not to pay the fucking fine.
Right.
Okay? It doesn't matter what your crime is. Air quotes. You've still broken the law. So what's your process of redemption? Is it you haven't forgiven yourself, therefore you're taking it out on everybody else and trying to make yourself up on a pedestal?
Yeah. Get off your high horse.
I mean, I think that's what it... But where would you go? Like yourself, if you could out an executive director who was a shitty executive director, is that what you would do? Would you weaponize a mic? Would you use Twitter? I mean, it's a tough call.
It's heavy, yeah.
Right?
I don't know. I think I don't even want to give a yes or no to that.
Because this is the thing too. These bureaucrats who know it's wrong, they know the system is wrong, are too afraid to talk. Well, who talks?
Well, and talking is probably the most important thing to do to see any change. That's funny. We can actually segue into what I was going to talk about because it happened when, in regards to climate change, I watched this TED talk about climate change, and she said one of the most important things people can do is talk about it. And she references that politics and the government keep, what's the best word for it? I was going to say cutting down, but they keep saying, not all of them, of course, that there is no such thing as climate change and global warming and that humans are not responsible. Every time a scientist comes out with a new study, then there's a politician saying, yeah, but I know a scientist who says that's not true. And anyways, to my point, she just says one of the biggest things is to speak about it because it's not something that is talked about often enough. So what do you think about climate change? Do you think the climate is changing?
So I'm going to podcast I would suggest right off the bat is the episode between Joe Rogan and Howard Bloom.
Howard Bloom.
You got to see that.
Better write that down.
Yeah, you have to see that, especially before your next episode. You need to see that.
Howard Bloom, got it.
Howard Bloom is renowned. I'm not going to go into it too much, but I'm going to talk about my own personal education.
Yeah.
We definitely know that the poles of the Earth have shifted before 180 degrees and then flipped all the way to 360 degrees. This is actual fact. This Earth has done that.
Okay.
It's done it. So would that dictate to us that the world's climate has changed before? Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Also, does the climate change 4 times a year?
Yes.
The climate changes.
Well, of course.
Okay, so is climate change real? Sure. Now, where I become suspicious is the narrative that's being dictated to me.
Mm-hmm.
There's too many holes in it. And there's
like coming from scientists?
all sides.
All sides, all right.
All sides. Remember when we were talking in conspiracy, air quotes.
Yeah.
There's so much information on the internet.
Yes.
And you heard Bob Lazar say, anybody who's trying to make sense of anything, you're fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Because there's so much bullshit in the internet.
Yes. Yeah, and it's true.
It's 100%, especially in this climate change thing.
Yes, I know. It's everywhere.
There's so much to read, so much to pile through.
Yeah, trust me, I know.
that it's nutty.
Yeah, that's why I
and so
have pages of notes.
Is it colder now than it was before? I don't know. Because I remember living in Northern Ontario at times where there was like the stop signs were covered. We'd have to dig out the stop signs in snow.
From snow.
Okay, so I remember that as a kid. I remember in one snow falling, no exaggeration, the snow went up to the 2nd story window in one night. That's how much snow fell. Our front doors were literally barricaded in by snow. Okay, I saw that in Northern Ontario. -40 would be achieved quite often in Northern Ontario, not by wind chill. It was just -40. Okay, so then moving here, and -40 is achieved because of a wind chill factor, which means, so -40 for Americans is like, it's about your minus 38 Fahrenheit. Okay, that gives them an understanding.
Yeah.
Right?
Some of them are probably like, holy.
Yeah, so it's still cold.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
But that's only if you're directly in the wind in Alberta.
Yeah, like it could be -25 and that wind makes it feel like -40.
That's right. Well, it is -40 no matter what. You're still subject to like frostbite.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
However, if you stand outside of the wind, it's like -25, which is like it's +2, +3 for them in America. Around there. Okay. So is that changing? Well, I can tell you that the permafrost doesn't last as long. However, the permafrost is deeper than it's ever been before.
Okay.
So like frost when we, in the ground is deeper for sure. Are we having more forest fires? Sure. Mm-hmm. However, we also have to look at what we've done. So let's use Jasper, Canada, as an example. When was the last time we had a forest fire in Jasper, Canada? Never.
I was going to say, I can't remember.
Yeah, never,
have we?
Never. Well, why is that? Well, we do what's called selective logging in Jasper so that it doesn't burn.
Yeah.
Well, why would we do that? Because Jasper is a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a big national park.
It's a huge
tourist attraction.
Yeah, we make a lot of money off that. So would it be in the best process for the Canadian government or the Alberta government or the BC government in any of these mountain parks to allow it to burn? No way.
No, that would be terrible.
That's right. They lose a lot of money. Now, are forest fires natural? Yes. The forest has to burn in order to rejuvenate. Mm-hmm. I, as a surveyor, have cut through many, I call them burn victims, but I've cut through a lot of them in order to put pipelines through, well sites in there, access roads, you name it.
Well, there are controlled burns.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Why is it that we're not doing controlled burns anymore? We used to do them all the time.
That might be a preventative measure.
100%. But why? Now also, our forest is more dry now than ever. Is this because there's less snow? Well, that's not the truth. We've had more snow over the last 3 years than ever before. Yet, and we've had less rain though. And you hear the farmers bitching all the time because there's no moisture in their soil. All right, so that's fine. So if we take that and then we also look at the ecosystem in the bush, well, the bush is dry too. So is this just a natural thing that we're going through a drought?
Yeah.
Could be.
Possibly.
Now, what we also know is that the axis of the North Pole is falling. So what kind of dramatics would that create for us? That's huge, right? Then the next question that we have to ask ourselves is, were polar bears skinny and dying in the north before we had readily available access to pictures? Sure they were. I mean, this the natural effect of fucking life in the Arctic.
In the Arctic.
Like if the bears don't get to the Baffin Islands, they're fucked. like that's it.
See, I referenced the polar bears one time, how skeptical I was just about how dramatic some media makes everything seem. That's why I want to talk about it. I want to hear different people's opinions about it because, like we said, there's stuff about climate change all over the internet. Everybody has their ideas. But here, so I was reading this article, and a lot of people use global warming and climate change in the same sentence. It's not the same. So this is a definition I read. I want to see what you think. So global warming applies to the long-term trend of just the average global temps increasing.
100%.
And then climate change is a broader term, and it reflects the fact that carbon pollution caused by us does more than warm our planet, and this pollution is changing things like rain and snow patterns and increasing storms and droughts. I think this is where a lot of people think that's crap.
Okay, so this is my question to you. The Earth right now is the most hospitable Earth that's ever been towards our life.
Yes.
Okay? Even with the toxins. Let me ask you this. In the formation of the Earth, when the volcanoes were going at mass, okay, they spew out carbon. Mm-hmm. That carbon you breathe in right now will fucking die. You will die. Okay? If we're going to go into the greater, our carbon out of a vehicle and carbon out of when the Earth was being created and spewing out all that it was, like Mount St. Helens, which is an inverted volcano.
Yeah.
The Earth adapted and overcame. Mm-hmm. And this is my point. We as humans believe that we are this thing that is so big to Mother Earth. And we're not. We're an insignificant fucking pissant.
Yes.
That the Earth could just blow away. And if we're going to grandiose ourselves saying, we created this damn... Like, fuck. The only thing that we could really take claim to is the cocksucking plastic in the oceans.
Yeah, no doubt. But yeah, that's what I mean. There's so many people who say that we all, as a whole, must reduce our carbon footprint, and that will solve so many problems. Maybe that will solve some problems.
But see, okay.
But is that really affecting our rain?
So let's also look at this. So, and I'm going to tie this into the rhetoric.
Okay.
So here in Alberta, we sell oil. Okay, that's and it also accounts for 43% of the Canadian economy that we've just currently lost. Okay, who is against Canadian oil? It's a huge foundation called the Tides Foundation, which is out of California. If you look at who gave Justin Trudeau the most amount of money in his campaign, it was the Tides Foundation, which is illegal because it was an outside of Canada foundation. It's a not-for-profit. Okay.
Okay.
What Tides was awarded was the cleanup of all of the water on Indigenous lands. Okay, so reserves, all that stuff. The Tides Corporation is what's going out there out to these communities to filter their water. Okay, that's the contract they got. Now, who's the lobbyist against Canadian oil? Tides. Tides is the largest lobbyist against Canadian oil. Now, who paid Tides? It was Texaco. Texaco gave the money to Tides in order to lobby against Canadian oil. Another company who also gave that money to them was the Rothschilds, who has the largest investments in American oil ever to be seen.
Wow.
So now your oil is propping up a not-for-profit Greenpeace company, I shouldn't say that, but like some sort of green corporation.
Right.
to lobby against Canadian oil. Why? You got to ask yourself why. You got to follow the money. Mm-hmm. If Tides is doing that for Texaco and these oil baron companies, it's because the oil baron companies damn well know that if we put our ethical oil out on the market, they can't survive with us. We have the second largest oil reserve in the world. And sure, it's expensive for us to refine, but it's the cleanest refinery that you can have because of the process that we use. Also, if you look at the other lobbying companies or lobbyist interest groups that are against Canadian oil, they're backed by Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is? So my point is this, and we had Laura, the nutrition guru, on the show, and she was saying, as much as she doesn't like a lot of these, Monsantos and all these people, guess who pays her to do her research? Those people. Guess what's happening here? This is why I encourage you to listen to the Howard Bloom, Joe Rogan podcast, because Howard Bloom has been around. He was around, and he's crazy smart. I suggested this to Kenny, and I'm suggesting it to you. He was around when the invention of Earth Day came around, and he'll explain to you the meeting that he was involved in order to create Earth Day, and how long this propagation of earth and environment has been happening. Mm-hmm. Because if we look at when we lost religion in society, it was really in the early 90s we lost it. We really lost it.
Okay.
A large portion of society was not going to church. Well, what's the new church? Science.
Yes.
How dare you speak wrong or ill will of what science's findings are? They're facts, don't you know? Mm-hmm. Are they really, though?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that the talk that I watched, she was dead set. Well, she is a scientist. Mm-hmm. She says it very much, and she's also a professor when it came to atmospheric sciences. So that's why I was really intrigued about watching her talk. And she was just so determined that politicians are the reason that people aren't taking this topic seriously. Like, that was her view on it. And she was saying that there was a poll just done in 2018 in the US that 70% of people agreed that the climate is changing, but 3/4 of those people said that they never heard it spoken of at all on media, and for that reason they don't say anything themselves.
See, one of the things that I would suggest is that scientists need to get real and honest. I don't believe that they're honest. And I love what Joe Rogan said, because I'll quote it because it's pretty fucking real. We like to think that scientists are great, lovey people. That's not the truth. I've met scientists here on the podcast who are not loving people. That's just not what they are. And if you want to look at some of the greatest scientists in the world, they came from the Nazi Party. They were brought over in an operation called Operation Paperclip, and they are not nice people. The guy who ran NASA was an SS major officer from Nazi Germany and ran NASA in America. Okay, scientists are not nice people, and if we are to believe that they wouldn't lie for their own corporate interests, air quotes, we are being ignorant and naive. I mean, I think this is the issue, even in the Canadian population. We're so accepting that people are honest that we're not willing to question them. And so we really have to put on that filter of, okay, who's paying you?
Yeah, follow the money. Like,
why
you're
are
saying.
you doing this? I mean, Liam said it yesterday. He went off on a little bit of a tangent, which kind of tied into our last month about teaching. And he goes, the teachers as a collection. So imagine how many teachers there are in Canada, and all their unions and all their stuff.
Yes.
This is thousands of people coming together to predict where Canadian children are going to find employment later on in life. And so they train them. And I said this, they train them at a young age to get there. Okay, so who are the corporate interests for teachers to do that? Well, all of a sudden Apple says, we'll give you a bunch of free tablets.
Yeah.
What the hell, right? Like it's right there in your face. And I think with this climate change thing, because it's even it's a greater population, but it's a geopolitical population. It's even tighter. It's even quieter. And it's like two social workers talking to each other about the addiction issue. They're not going to talk in real terms of the way how I'm saying your fucking shit doesn't work.
Yeah.
Instead, they're going to go back and forth about suggestiveness.
Yeah.
And this model works. And let's take this model. You know what? Ooh, guts to your fucking model. It doesn't mean shit. What means shit is actual values that people see. And coming from the geo world, you know, being a surveyor, so on, like all of these things where it was very scientific. It was a practice of trigonometry and the means of a measurement tied to a geographical location of the earth, which is then tied to a northern measurement. My whole life is scientific as a surveyor. It's practicing a formula with ethics. That's all I ever did. Okay. Going from that world and to recognize I can go beyond what I know. And I can speculate. And my speculation is valid because there is serious discernment. And the hypotheses that I'm working out in my mind isn't just half-cocked. I thought about it and saw a couple of videos on fucking YouTube. There's more than that.
Yeah.
Right? I've made a real discernment about what I'm going to what I'm bringing to the table. And so I think those people from school need to get past that. They have to start hypothesizing and stepping out on a whim because university teaches us all you don't know shit unless you can prove it 3 different fucking ways. That's what university teaches us. And this is no good when it comes to trying to prescribe this stuff to a mass society when collectively they have the intelligence of first year college, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying that in a shitty way, but I'm saying this is that elitism that happens. And when you look even at, I would suggest this TED talk that you're talking about, when you look at this person, there's a condescension coming out of her mouth saying, well, I know this because I am who I am. I'm a scientist.
Because I'm a contest. This is what I study. La la. That's almost similar to when you were just speaking about the organization that you had put together and 10 out of 10 people made it to treatment, yada yada, and you were turned down because you didn't have those letters at the end of your name. Right. It's almost like we should all believe her because she does, because she's a scientist.
That's right.
Right.
And this is why I'm saying fuck what they know. You have to value it in common sense terms. Right? Commonalities is what's going to make sense to the general society. And that's why I say Howard Bloom is a scientist out of MIT and Caltech. He graduated Caltech at 16 years old, man. Like wow. he is a fucking genius. Like you have no idea. You'll be very interested in the show because he goes on many things. But when he talks about specifically climate change and all that stuff, he is a coast to coast guy. So he was on Coast to Coast many, many times, the radio show. He's bit of a conspiracist, but he has nothing to gain. And he's an actual scientist. Right. And because he is on, I would say, on the intelligence scale of like Elon Musk. Oh, okay. His word is very much validated. Right? And like I said, he's not there in any sort of corporate capacity. He's not there to gain anything.
He's not gaining crap.
He's just trying to be honest.
I can't wait to watch it. I'll watch it tonight for sure.
Yeah, especially before your thing. Your thing coming up. Yeah, it'll give you a lot of. It gives you the other perspective, right?
Yeah, and that's the whole point of this month, right?
Because I think too, like we as people looking at this information, the algorithm dictates to us. This is the other scary thing too that just came out in pop culture is that Facebook has been charged with selling algorithms to interest groups.
Really?
Yeah. So like all of a sudden you see all this shit that you want that you're liberal or whatever, right? Well, why do you think that happened? That happened because they sold your algorithm to the liberal whatever.
Interesting.
So that's what's happening right now. So I hate Facebook.
I hate Facebook. Are you recording right now?
Yeah. And I'm not erasing any of that. I fucking hate them.
Oh, jeez. Facebook's all right. Anyways, so is it safe to say that, in your opinion, you do not think severe weather is caused by us humans and our pollution? Because a takeaway that I got from this talk that I keep referencing is...
What's her name?
Catherine Hayhoe.
Okay.
Yeah. She thinks a huge solution is reducing our carbon footprint and like unplugging things and using electric cars, and food waste being such a huge issue, which maybe it is, but
okay,
she wants us to wean off fossil fuels, essentially. Do you think really that is going to change everything? Do you think that is why heat waves are more intense and heavy precipitation is worse? Or is that just Earth being Earth, right? Like, do you think humans are causing this?
So I like the idea of electric cars.
I do too.
The reason why I like it is not because of fossil fuels. I like it because there's power right now and it's a faster car.
Oh, okay.
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 But also there's something to be said about the muscleness of a motor. Like a classic car. Mm-hmm. There's a feeling about that, right? That I like. And I like manually shifting it. And I like feeling that rev, right? That testosterone drive. And I don't think you're going to get that in an electric car.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Also.
Right.
Human waste.
Or like food waste.
Yeah, I consider that just all human waste.
Okay.
Yeah, there's more humans on Earth than ever before. And if we look at China, who had the biggest model of people, they tried to cap them on children and they created more kids. We talked about that.
Yes.
Now that they don't have a cap on children, it's declining, right? Their population is declining. So do I really think that we produce that much carbon from the food that we eat? Well, I think we could take better care in packaging things. Will fossil fuels ever be killed? Well, no. You use oil. You use petroleum in jelly. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah.
You use petroleum in BPA, non-BPA plastics.
Yeah. Well, and let's be real here. These solutions. Who's going to buy all of these electric cars for the population?
Well, eventually, I mean, I agree. I agree with Elon Musk. Eventually, carbon vehicles are going to be like a dinosaur, right? They just have to bring the cost down.
Yeah.
In 20 years, the cars that you and I are driving right now are not going to be on the market. I mean, Chevy's already gone into a place, Chevy Cruze, where that's a complete electric car, right? They're starting to turn the model for it, right? Where eventually everybody's going to have an electric car, and then eventually everybody's not going to be producing fossiled vehicles anymore, and I'm fine with that. I mean, that's fine with me. But it's not because of an impact on society. I just like the car.
Yes,
right?
I see where you're coming from. Absolutely.
I'm not, and then the other issue that I think that we lose within our generation, like I go hiking, and at one time we used to have a ton of people on the trails. Do we have a ton of people on the trails anymore? Not even a little bit. As a matter of fact, here in Canada, we're starting to see trails closed because they don't have the income wealth in order to maintain those trails anymore.
Because they're not being used enough.
So now you have people who are so disassociated with what natural is, like a bear killing a fucking deer, that all of a sudden we start saying, we need to stop the spring bear hunt. What the fuck are you talking? They will murder us if we don't kill them. You get me? Feel me?
Yeah.
And because there's such a disassociation now, we start saying, well, It's us who are polluting this. Well, did you as a person go out there and see that? There's some things in life that you can accept as tangible, like the world is round. Okay?
Yes.
You don't have to go out in space and see that it's actually round. Okay.
You don't have to go out into space to know that there is space.
However, if you as a Canadian have the ability to go to the fucking Baffin Islands to see if all these polar bears are really dying, go without somebody dictating to you where to go to see it. Polar bears are dangerous, by the way, so I'm not suggesting you go alone. You need to have a gun. They will kill you. Okay? They will. They're not friendly. They don't understand humans or English or any language you fucking speak. They don't know it. Okay?
They're probably faster than you.
So I think that's why Canadians as a whole are a little bit skeptical, and I would like to see this. What's the difference between people who live in a metropolis believing in climate change next to people who live in rural areas?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Right? Because people who are in rural areas have a direct relationship with nature.
Yes.
People who live in metropolises, it's secondhand knowledge. And when you're saying to them, look at the carbon, well, shit, in Toronto, you can see the fucking carbon hanging over the middle of the city.
Places that have so much
Can
traffic,
you see that?
right?
Can you see that in a place like Kapuskasing, Ontario, or Timmins? Fuck no. It's green, man.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, when you live there, you can see the disasters that mining has created. So you see the disasters that mining has created. However, the moose are fine. We can still go fishing.
Yeah.
Right? We can still go bear hunting. Mm-hmm. We're still hiking in the bush. I'm still drinking the water and not dying.
Exactly.
So to bring it from a place where we have these people spewing a narrative to the people who were really the populace, it's hard to accept. How do you accept that? I think it's easier for people who live in the microcosm of a metropolis to accept it. But some motherfucker living in Iowa, Timbuk fuck nowhere.
Probably like, we're fine.
Right? Like, what are you talking about? I go fishing all the fucking time. Like,
I breathe fresh air daily.
Yeah. Like, you're fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Somebody who lives in Nelson, BC.
Yeah. Nelson's beautiful.
Right?
I have family there.
Mind you also look at Nelson, and you have two people in Nelson. Using that as a microcosm again. You have far left hippies who are like, we're killing the fucking world. And then you have other people who are out there just to be contrast, murdering bears. Right? So those are the two contrasts that you have in that town on its extreme version. Then you have people in the middle.
Yep.
However, I would bet you the common ground is, well, it hasn't affected us. Really, like they say it is. Mm-hmm. Yet a lot of and this is the other thing that makes me question things, is they use places that's not readily accessible for you and I to go and see. So we have to
take their word for
secondhand knowledge. Like you and I are probably more accessible to getting to the North Pole or the North Country than we are to Antarctica. What about somebody in the middle of America? There's no way they're getting to the fucking North Pole, not unless they're abundantly rich, or the South Pole. Yeah. So what are they going to look at? They're going to look at, well, this fucking river in Timbuk fucking nowhere, Iowa. My farms are okay. Mm-hmm. I'm still yielding. It doesn't make sense to them. People in Northern Ontario, they have the same 8-foot fucking snowfall every year. What are you talking about? Yeah. It's not much different. The river's raised. Shit, this happens every 4, 5, 10 years.
Right? Yeah. 1 year's low, 1 year's high, 1 year it's normal.
What are you trying to quantify here?
Yeah.
And when you listen to what Howard Bloom says, where he says these scientists just need to get real and say they want to put a thermostat on the earth.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I got out of this. And
he said they just have to be honest about it.
Yeah.
And people will be accepting. At this point, though, you're trying to propagate them and falsehoods. Yeah. And people are not going to accept that.
Yeah. Well, this Catherine referenced Saying things like this is a natural cycle of the earth is just a smokescreen that the government is telling people. That's her opinion in her talk, at least, that there are smokescreens. Like, scientists are in it for the money. She said that's something she is told every week.
Well, and you know what? She may be very passionate about what she may be right. You know, the issue is we don't know.
We really don't.
We don't know, and the populace doesn't know. And maybe we are on the precipice of fucking the movie 2012.
Yeah.
Maybe we're on the precipice of that, and maybe we're not. And maybe what I can tell you is that a small portion of society has been able to dictate a lot of shit. I mean, think about this for a second. So Nazi Germany wanted to rule the earth, right? Geographically, they wanted to rule everything. We will never see a war like that again.
Never.
Okay? And the reason why I say that is because really people don't give a shit what they rule. Okay? The next wars will be theory. Climate change, no climate change.
I was going to say, isn't that happening already? Yeah.
Right? Okay,
yeah.
These are the wars. And people will start shooting each other for that. Okay? But did Nazi Germany really lose the war? See, the biggest thing that Nazi Germany really wanted was to be able to have a consortment of a council in order for the Nazi party to rule the earth. What's the European Union? European Union's ran by Germany. It's not Nazi Germany, but it's still ran by Germany for the most part.
Right.
And they dictate. This is the reason why Brexit is happening in the UK. Britain did not like the way that they were being dictated to about how they were going to run their economics and their local laws. And they had no control over their immigration. Which in turn means you have no control over your sovereignty.
Right.
Okay? So if we look at that model where Germany went wrong, or where Nazi Germany went wrong, was they tried to physically do it. You know what they learned instead? They learned how to do it by creating an economic smokescreen. And it's a very small portion of people who did that. And look at what they created from a small consortment of people. Mm-hmm. It's now the European Union. We're in the same idea with this USMC deal between America, Canada, and USA. We still maintain sovereignty in our deal. But look at how much sovereignty has been lost in the European Union. There's a reason why Poland wants out. There's a reason why Italy wants out. There's a reason why Hungary wants out of that deal. Mm-hmm. They've lost their sovereignty. So my point is to look at what a small group of people can do there. Now look at what a small group of people might be able to do with climate change.
Yeah.
Right? It's you have to ask the question. We cannot just go along accepting that it's real. I mean, I'd like to. I like to believe that people aren't trying to hoodwink people. Right. However, I've become jaded enough to know that's not. Yeah. There's invested interests. And what are those invested interests? And when you hear a guy like Howard Bloom talk, who is up to date on climate change, global warming, the whole onslaught of it, and he is not a Trumpian. He fucking hates Trump. But at least he's willing to spew the truth.
Yes.
So when you hear him talk about these issues, he's at least willing to come to the table without a bias. Mm-hmm. And he's willing to look at the information without being bought. He has no invested interest in any of it. So I think we need more of that. People who are willing to lay out the pros and cons. What makes me suspicious of this lady from what you're telling me is she's only one side of the spectrum.
Oh, she's very much one-sided. Yeah.
And that I mean, we have to, I mean, even here on the show, I will tell you my biases. Mm-hmm. And that's straight up. Like, I'll tell you my biases.
Yeah.
So.
Well, opinions like that are easier to respect.
Well, and I think at least you know where I'm coming from. And if you want to challenge it, that's fine. I'm not opposed to that. I think like it's unfortunate that meteorologist wouldn't come on the show.
It is unfortunate, yeah.
Because that's what it boils down to. Like we need to have open dialogue regardless of where and who you are, what you are. So like whatever you think you are.
Yes.
We have to exercise our freedom of expression no matter how ignorant it may seem to somebody.
Well, yeah.
That's how you express.
Yeah, that's the whole point of having the freedom to express.
That's like saying to me, you're only allowed to use this color of black painting that picture. Same deal. You're saying now instead of all of these wonderful colors, you're allowed 3.
Yeah.
That's what we do when we take away words. That's what we do when we take away narratives. That's what we do when we take away, when we don't afford people the opportunity to use the vernacular that is inherent to them in order to express their opinions. That's what we do. And I think this is why we fall into this place of climate change where we say, well, you're not allowed to say that because that's not accepting in population. So that's how we take away their argument now. We don't go forward in trying to debate. We just say, no, you're not allowed that vernacular.
I love debates.
So therefore you're not allowed those you're not allowed to say that. Right? Yeah. That's how they take away, or that's how certain people take away that argument. Because they don't have a response. They just say, well, you're not allowed to say that.
Just shut it down.
Yeah, you're not publicly anyways. You shouldn't even think of that. Right? Like I said, man, I don't understand where society turned and allowed justice social warriors to become the fucking police. There's a reason why we have laws, and the police protect those laws. There's a reason for that. As shitty as that system is,
there's still a reason.
We pay them to do that.
Exactly.
Right? It's not up to us as society to police ourselves. Makes no sense. It makes no sense. You're not doing anything wrong unless you've broken a law. If you haven't broken a law, you haven't done anything wrong. And just because somebody thinks you've done something wrong doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong.
Yeah, that's just one person's opinion.
That's their opinion.
Yeah.
It's not the consortment. Because there's rights that you have that need to also be protected. So.
Well said.
Yeah, I mean I think that's where we're at. I'm interested to see what you're going to do with the Howard Bloom piece. Because I think you're going to look at that.
Can't wait to watch it.
You're going to be like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And when you see where he comes from, you'll be like he created all these bands and stuff.
Okay.
And he did it for funsies, like super bands. You'll see who he managed. You'll be like, what the fuck? Yeah. And he's like he's an introvert. Like you have no idea. Yet he's producing mass bands, and yet coming out of Caltech, he could have fucking started Los Alamos. Like he could have worked at Los Alamos. Instead, he decided, fuck it, I'm going to go work in the arts and see if I can propagate a band.
That's awesome.
And that's what he did. And he was very, very successful at it. Oh yeah, wait till you get into all that. Anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Should we wrap this up?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so if you want to check out the After the Show blog, where can they get that, Chelsey?
At www.lifeonlifestermspodcast.com.
For sure. Where's your Instagram page?
My Instagram is Chelsey_LifeOnLife's
Your Twitter?
Chelsey Kapler. Nice and simple.
My Twitter's Life on Life's Terms. The Instagram for the show is Life on Life's Terms. There's typically either a video of me talking about what the show's going to be on Thursday, Friday, or the clips go out. I've been having issues. I don't know. Things are happening. Things are not happening. You can
technology.
You can also check us out on that wonderful thing called Facebook. Life on Life's Terms podcast, all one word. We keep pretty up to date on there. All the clips are there throughout the week. So that's where we really put out the extra, like the upcoming stuff, like all the teasers and stuff.
Yeah, gives you a little glimpse.
Yeah, and then go check out that website. Shout out to Kelsey. She's the newest member of Life on Life's Terms, and she signed up I can't remember. I think the last week of May. So shout out to Chelsey. Thanks for joining the show or becoming a member.
Do some writing.
Yeah, and you can also. Oh no, there was another Chelsey.
Oh,
no,
okay.
that joined the. They joined as a member on the podcast.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
I was really confused there for a minute.
No, that's okay. Yeah. We have a new blogger in the works, hopefully.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You guys, I'm tired today.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want all the notifications and all that stuff, go to that www.lifeonlifesterms.podcast. You'll get all the notifications of upcoming blogs, events, and also podcast shows. And the reason why we ask for your email is not so that we can sell it to our sponsors, but so that we can notify you when up and coming things are happening.
Which you want to know.
Yeah. So happy Friday to you all, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Peace.
See you guys next week.